to try something or to include something that I'm not sure would be authentic to the work that I'm doing, so that I feel like if I was to do it, I'd be forcing it. So an example is when you're talking about that final assignment and doing maybe video clips, if I'm not going to do that, I feel like it would be more worthwhile if I included something else, different data like journals or something, and tried to work from there. And maybe down the road I will use that, a video clip or picture or something. But for that third assignment, I feel like I felt like I should be including it, or I won't do very well, or I won't be meeting the expectations, but I'm not sure that it's going to be authentic to what I'm doing. Does that make sense? Okay, yeah, there, I'm done.
You shouldn't do anything that's not authentic.
Okay.
How could you? Could you do that?
Well, no, but that's what I just felt like maybe I should be trying to force it in there. But, okay. Good. 2 birds with one stone.
Your turn. 2 birds with one stone.
Yeah.
You want to blame her on the circle? No.
No, Wendy said she had something
I'm
wrong.
going to go second. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Does that mean you're going to do, I have a terrible profile.
He's zooming in too.
Yeah, really.
I can see it.
I really like your timely feedback. Like when I send you a paper, and if I send it early, you're very good about giving me really good timely feedback. Sometimes I find it a little more general, and I'm not quite sure if it's specific enough. Sometimes I'm not quite sure where to go next or how to utilize that feedback to impact the next piece of work that I'm doing.
I'll try to keep that in mind, that certainly. Can you give me an example?
Sometimes it's more, it's general, and I'm thinking about the assignment we just did. So there was a general statement, and you're always very positive, always. You sort of do that whole stars on a wish thing. But the second piece talked about putting something in the next paper that I had said I was going to put in the next paper in the final paragraph of the paper that I had just written. So it was sort of, yep, I was going to do that, but I wasn't sure if there was something else that I should be doing or something else you want to comment on the writing itself, so I wasn't really sure of how to then upgrade that one or then utilize your feedback to upgrade the next piece of work that I'm going to do.
Well, you write very well, Wendy, and I mean, your work is comprehensive, I think you know that. So it's hard for me really to find very much that needs work. A couple times I've made suggestions, but really your work is comprehensive. And I mean, you're going to be writing a whole book if we don't get this project done soon.
Yes.
What's wrong with that?
You're right.
But I'll try to keep that in mind.
This is a technical piece, and I do appreciate how willing you are to share everything that you do. You're willing to share that. I rely on your for example, I rely on your PowerPoint presentations. I keep my notes below the slides that are there. Tonight is an example of I'm ready to go because it's an important piece, but that slide isn't there. So I would like to suggest that you were here at 5 o'clock, that we not bother printing and getting the material ready before you come. So that's the most recent PowerPoint. We print it off. We have it, the facilities that we just have that. We run the copies here, so it's ready to go. Because I lost some information that I'm going to have to rely on other people to get. So it's a technical piece.
Really, my purpose was a good one, and that was that I wanted to get it to Wendy so it wasn't a last-minute flurry for her. But I get your point, well taken.
On the other side of that, the flip side of that was that I was able to read it last night, which for me is the slowing down bit, so I could read through it and get an idea of where we were going to go today. And I'm looking forward to sending the upgraded one. But I actually really appreciated the chance to read it last night.
So maybe I should be doing both. I mean, it's no big deal. I mean,
That's
Just don't print it.
yeah, maybe just don't print it. Yeah.
Because you can just post it to the conference and then.
because I'm still thinking as I'm walking out the door, you know, I put another slide in just before I left.
And we do that all the time. Like with work that we think about when you even plan a lesson for a classroom, right? You go in
You
and
do
go,
this
oh,
in your sleep, I do it in my sleep.
Yes.
I wake up and I think, I gotta
Yeah.
add that.
yeah. Or you're driving and you hear something or something happens and you want to add
My
it.
husband hates that in the morning. When I get up and, I was just thinking, he goes,
Go ahead.
Liz?
So, I'm grateful for this opportunity, and I could go on and on about the wonderful things, but I'm actually writing about some of those things in my paper, so you'll have an opportunity to read them later. One area for improvement, I think, for all educators, and I've seen it with you too, Jackie, and I'm not sure what the solution is because it's a bigger problem, but it's around the marks thing, right? That's why I was getting kind of anxious about it. Because this is one of those situations where I think it's not a false dichotomy. It either does count or it doesn't. If there's a mark at the end of the course, a teacher-assigned mark at the end of the course, then marks count, right? It's as simple as that. And so when something, if you are motivated by the mark, which I think I'm much better at that than I ever was. I'm not so motivated by the mark, but I think I still succumb to the idea that the mark reflects my ability and skill and things like that, right? Because that's a difficult thing to detach yourself from. However, I said this to Karen the other day. I don't care what mark I get, or even if I finish this master's, because the growth and that I've experienced is priceless. So unmarkable. You can't put a mark on it. However, so in this particular course, one example is, well, it was actually the last course, but I noticed just looking over some of the papers yesterday, the same thing looks like it's going to happen again, is that 90% of our mark is a couple of assignments and things like that. And then 10% is participation. And so I was thinking about that, and I also really value your reconsideration of marks when you do that. I think all good educators reconsider marks once they get everything in. When I use participation marks in my classroom, I always give students an opportunity to provide input for that participation mark, because I think that's where the growth opportunity is. If I think I've participated 9 out of 10, and you think I've participated 6 out of 10, there's an issue somewhere, right? And so there needs to be some dialogue, and there needs to be an opportunity for feedback. And then when I did it, I hardly ever had to change the participation mark, because I find students are harder on themselves than we are as instructors. So I would make that suggestion an opportunity for input, which also then gives us the opportunity to act, reflect, and revise. Right? And then I would maybe even suggest it at the midpoint in the course, so that if there's something I need to change, I'm aware of it and have the opportunity to revise my behavior accordingly.
I actually hate that part of it. I mostly give everybody 9 or 10 because when you talk about participation, I mean, for somebody who's quiet, who participates a little, that's a big contribution.
Yes.
For somebody that's very outgoing and talkative and dialogic, that's the way they learn.
Well, that was going to be my critique as well, because I think that's an evaluation in some respects of the learning style or the intelligence of the person, because some people they're not very vocal. And or they take a while, like in the last course, it took me a while to warm up. Like I always do that. I always feel a little bit hesitant at the beginning when I have a new instructor, and it takes me a while to feel comfortable. And I find and it's philosophically, I find it hard to, I didn't hear what you said, I find it hard to have that put upon me, that participation is going to count. I find that a difficult piece.
It's just a Brock thing. So
Is it a Brock thing? Okay.
We had a discussion at AERA last year that we should give up marks altogether. Hillary and I are of the same opinion. We should give up marks. They won't let us.
But on that
Participation
page,
be more accurately looked upon as engagement? Like, are you here and involved and looking and caring about what we're doing, or are you not? Like that's, I don't think you have to speak to be engaged in what's going on.
yeah, and I don't want to really actually
beat that participation thing to death, because I
Yeah,
think
okay.
it's over. But my point is the marks thing, more
Yeah,
importantly.
well, let's do that. I
So-
will do that.
So,
I like it. Takes the
what?
pressure off me.
well, and so not just for participation, but even for
Let's
your
make it an
mark in the
in-class
course.
thing.
Is that on
Like,
video?
Let's make it a 5-minute in-class.
One
Right
thing,
action.
It is now.
one thing I think Mike did that alleviated a lot of anxiety was he said at the beginning of the course, everybody's going to get an A. Everybody's going to get an A. Now, A has, 80 to 100, right?
Well, I think I said that in the summer, the same as applies, everybody's gonna get A here.
Yeah.
So if
So,
you hand it in, you've done the work, you're all A quality people. In terms of your work. The only way you can't get an A is if you don't hand it in.
You guys took that idea for criticism.
Ken?
Ken,
close, Ken.
That's only your cheat.
it's a close, only cheat, all right, back up a bit. I don't know, oh, now it's great, okay. Ken Jones, 4++ on participation.
It's out of 10, Ken.
Oh, all right, 4++ it is then.
That's like an
That wasn't even the funny part. The funny part is, it makes me wonder if we're an undercover boss. Have you guys seen that show?
Yes.
And she's just waiting to like
Oh,
take us
yes.
back to the headquarters. My only, I guess, critique was the list of those questions, the like 12, 14 questions or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Framework questions.
Yeah, the framework questions. I found that a little bit difficult to follow, and maybe it was just me, like, because on the first assignment, I kind of went away with thinking that 1 to 10 or 1 to 8 was assignment A, and then it was really 13, but 13 was the same as the presentation. So I guess just a few more headings, but that's just me.
Well, I
Or
accept
different.
that, though, it wasn't as clear. Some people heard that and others didn't, so I don't know how that happened. I mean, I thought I did say, basically, the answer to the questions in number 13, you've done it, but everybody didn't hear it, so, yeah, I agree with you.
Mine follows on the framework theme, and I want to echo the same thing everybody said. I really appreciate your timely feedback, and I found it very beneficial. One thing I struggle with is trying to find, and I think Jill, I heard partly, and I'm feeling echoed in what you're saying, just trying to find the way to write the chapter that is authentic to what I'm doing. And one thing that might be helpful is just to have, I do find it very helpful to read through some samples like Teresa McDougall and that sort of thing. Look at her data chapter, but it doesn't quite fit what I'm doing. But I don't want to read 10 of them, even though that would be good. It would be nice to have a sample of even just headings that people follow, like what, just at the beginning, and say, okay, here are a few, and try and find one and go to that one that I think maybe the flow fits my topic. Does that make
Well,
sense?
there are about 5 or 6 on Action Research Canada one that you can simply scroll through to find
Right.
a data chapter. If I could have brought some finished masters, but really the headings are your headings, you
Yeah.
know?
It just helps. I find, like, when I do find one that fits me, I think, oh, and then sometimes I start with that and then I go off on my own.
Let's pull
But
up one
just-
off the Action Research site and just scroll through it. Okay.
I'm going to go next, kind of fits with some of the things I said about the participation. I'm not on the class a lot, so I wrote it down so I could just read the screen. And it's funny because it's basically exactly what you said, Wendy, that I enjoyed your time of feedback, but I wish there was more criticism of where I need to go next. I'd read all your comments back and then saying to myself, that's it. I didn't think it was that good. What am I supposed to write next? Can't be that good yet.
But Kristen, it is.
I guess it's me, I'm being critical of myself.
It is, that's exactly what it is, because your project is coming along amazingly. I think you have to have confidence in what you're doing. You have the embodied knowledge, and you're just writing it.
Okay.
This kind of relates to what Kristen said. I just want to say, actually, the feedback that I'm giving you, I almost want to thank you for, because I recognize myself doing it in my classroom, and it's now becoming part of my project, is that I love the positive feedback you get, but sometimes I'm not quite sure where to go next. And when I get group advice, like the list that you put up, I find myself sitting there anxiously thinking, which ones of those are me? And I feel like I should know which it is, because I know when I do that with my own kids, my thought is, if I just tell you what to do next, you won't read through your stuff critically and figure it out for yourself. So you might not actually read the rubric, you might just look at the mark and move on. So I can understand where that's coming from. But now I'm in the student's perspective, and I'm thinking, I don't know which ones to focus on, because they all kind of feel like me, and I'm not sure which ones are me. And
I'm not clear what you're referring to.
the list that you gave, the look-fors, the list.
Okay.
And you kind of said, this is something that I noticed coming up in everybody's writing. And that people, or not everybody's writing, but some people's writing, or these are things that came up a lot in people's writing to work on as a look-for next time. And that happened last class as well. And so the list is very helpful. And as I'm reading it, I'm trying to think, okay, which ones of these do I have and which ones do I not have? But I'm not sure exactly where to, like, I just, to have
It's just
some...
a reminder, Megan, that, you know, the problem, it's always a balance issue. Some people don't want any direction, and some people really want a total heading direction. And so I'm trying to do both, but it sometimes ends up like people who don't want direction think, oh, well, that's the only direction.
Or even things like, you know, some of you need to get your work edited very, very badly, and of course, I'm sitting there thinking, oh, that's got to be me. But
It is her.
my Word document, I'm looking for editing marks, and I'm finding a few, but I can't open your program, so some of them I'm kind of guessing. Oh, I can sort of see what the issues are, but yeah, I guess it's just maybe a specific next step would be helpful for me, but on the page.
Well, I think generally most of you are kind of in similar positions. A couple are kind of very close to being done, but most of you are kind of building toward that last assignment. So the first one was kind of getting the early bits together on what data you have, and then the next one you kind of push, okay, now you've been looking at the data, you got themes now, right? And then we're moving now toward, you know, are you seeing the indicators you thought you needed in order to show that you're making that improvement? And the last chapter, the look-fors really are kind of more mechanical than they are sort of about your specifics. Because when you come to write your final project, these are the kinds of things that are expectations for writing in a master's project. So you don't need to take it personally, just to know that these are the kind of expectations that one will have of a student's writing.
Can I ask a question of Megan and Randy and whoever else, and you don't have to answer it, but so I'm wondering then, because if I have a question, if I'm not sure if Jackie meant that for me or not, I will email her and ask her because of the timely response.
Yep, email me
that I
anytime.
get. So, you know, recently there was a question, and I think it was like 6 emails before I actually really understood, you know, how that applied to me or whatever. And I think, like, this hasn't always been the case with, you know, my education anyway, that I have felt comfortable emailing a professor 5, 6 times asking for clarification or asking for input. So I think that speaks to, you know, my relationship anyway with you, and I think what the relationship you try to create for everyone. And maybe is it a reflection of, you know, changing times and the fact that people use emails, and maybe before you didn't get that opportunity, so you were expecting all of that detail at the onset? I don't know.
It's a culture shift. Like I think that
What? Sorry?
I think it's a culture shift for me anyway, because I'm used to, you tell me what to do, you leave me on my own, I hand it in at the end. I get really no feedback whatsoever at university, I got very little back. I got a mark at the end, I went on my merry way. I love this, by the way. You do such an amazing job, Jackie, and I appreciate the feedback, and I feel like you're stroking my ego a little bit when I need it, and then you kind of redirect me a little bit and say, no, it's okay, we'll work this out. You know, I absolutely love what your feedback that you're giving to me personally. But it is a culture shift, because I feel like there's a little, it's every time I send an email off, I feel a little guilty thinking, oh, I'm bugging her again. You know, I know she's busy, and here I am setting her off another one, so.
So is it our responsibility then, would you say? Is that
Well,
an understanding?
you know, I'm trying to be clear, but if I'm not, then I certainly would request that you follow up and say, I didn't really understand what you said. But you have to remember that it's not my research. I can only make suggestions as an outsider. I don't know what you know. You are the knowledgeable person in this research. You have a knowledge that no one else has. How could they? So from my perspective, I look at it from the lens of a researcher. Are you writing clearly? Are you writing with data to support? Is there sufficient data to support? And then make suggestions about, well, you haven't talked about your journals yet, and yet you refer to them as data. Where are the journal entries? So that's all I can do in my writing. I cannot know what you know. I mean, the knowledge in this room is absolutely staggering. And I think you don't believe in it. Sometimes I think you don't believe what you know. Your body embodied knowledge is fabulous.
And I can say that I always email and you get back to me very quickly, and I've phoned and you'll go back and forth and stuff. And for me, it wasn't a misunderstanding of feedback. It was more just, and I understood what was written, I just wondered about other things. So it wasn't
Yeah.
really an idea of...
Mine wasn't not, it was
Yeah.
nothing about misunderstanding
No.
feedback. It went along pretty much exactly with what Kristen said, which
Yeah.
was that it felt too good to be true, the comments. It felt like, what do I need to work on?
Yeah.
And then I see the list and I think, oh, maybe there is something I need to work on that I just didn't receive. Or...
I'm not giving you any more lists.
No, I like the list. The list is good.
I thought I was helping.
No, the list is a
No, it
good
is.
thing. It's a very good thing, because it's kind of like having that rubric or that checklist that I can check off and see how I'm doing. I just, I want check marks now.
You're doing
Confirming
great.
if
You're
you
doing
believe
great.
it.
You're all doing great. I wish I could get you to believe it. Maybe when you get that degree, you'll believe it, okay?
We could do that dance.
do the
We all do a
dance
dance together.
Yeah. When you walk across that stage,
Ken's gonna lead it.
I got preoccupied thinking about the dance.
What was that? Please don't do a profile for me. They're talking over there.
Still.
A lot of positives. For example, I can tell that you care and you get it and that you're genuine with us, and your whole being permeates that you care about us and that you're very, very genuine. And I think you're patient and supportive and obviously intelligent. For some reason, and it could be me, but I have a terrible time linking to an understanding of what you're saying. So when I read, for example, what I'm supposed to do for the final paper, it doesn't seem to click with me, it doesn't make sense to me.
What part?
Well, so there's a quote in here where it says, "We all attempt to make new things familiar by transforming them to be consistent with what we already know." And
That's
I
out
don't,
of Earl and Katz.
exactly, so I don't know what I think it must be me, but I find that even with the first course that I took with you, at the end of it, I didn't find there was anything I was gripping to. I think data scares me. I think quantitative data analysis is something I've never experienced, so I came into the first course with you scared because I thought I'm never going to understand this. I think I have a bit of a block-up. So now that I'm doing an action research approach, which I think fits well with me, and I think you led many of us there, and I think that was what I needed, I still cannot marry that approach
with what I'm supposed to be doing with data and how I'm supposed to bring this all together. So when I spoke about chapter 4 and how what we're supposed to be doing for me doesn't fit at all with what I'm doing, and I don't understand why, and I don't know what it is, but there's just something. Maybe I'm more philosophical and than you are. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but I have a hard time getting it, and I don't think I'm. I like to think that I'm not dull. So usually I'll pick up things, but I don't know. I just find that half the time I'm sitting here, I'm feeling like I'm vacillating between abysses, and I don't get what we're supposed to be doing. And I really didn't want to tell you that because I've been kind of sitting here thinking under the table, but it's true. Something doesn't click with me, and I don't know why.
So
I have a hard time.
when you say you're doing an action research project, what does that mean?
It means, I think, and again, this is what I'm saying, what I'm doing is I'm looking at me as a growing and developing entity. I'm looking at how I'm seeing growth and changes in myself, how others are perceiving those growth and changes. I'm trying to look at the subjective as objectively as I possibly can, and I'm trying to use data in an objective way in any means possible to try to validate my claims to know that I'm growing.
Well, it's not objective, it's highly subjective. And that's why you need the other voices. So there's nothing wrong with subjectivity as far as your own growth. Your knowledge of your growth is the most important voice. What you need then is some other voices to support that voice.
But then when I read, the final study consolidates all readings and interactions, and action inquiry will be conducted into an aspect of educational leadership by using the data available to schools to improve student achievement. The final paper will encompass all the earlier writings in an integrated study of the data available and its analysis. I don't know if that's what I'm already doing.
It is what you're already doing.
It just doesn't, I don't know, it just, to me, it just doesn't feel like what I'm doing maybe, so I have a hard time.
Well then, don't pay attention to that, just do what you're doing.
Okay then. Yeah, so I don't know
Well,
how to
you
explain
know
that. I
what
don't
you-
think that's about you at all, but I think it's just about when it is, you know, if you're trying to get at what it is you as an educator are doing really well, and maybe there's just that little percent of people, and maybe it's 5%, which would be me in a 20-person course, that just somehow feels like the means of the instruction doesn't hit me, and I don't know why, but it doesn't. I spend a lot of time trying to make sense of it. I don't know if you can do anything about that. As I said, I think it's me, but
Well,
I struggle.
it certainly gives me food for thought.
But I also wonder if it's the terminology, because I don't know, for some reason data scares the shit out of me. And I feel like I don't get it. I get it, but I have no confidence in it.
So what does data mean? What does that word mean to you?
See, and I picture numbers and think,
Well,
holy
you see,
crap,
there- yes.
and the teacher standing there.
Well, that's why I picked
wrong.
that Earl and Kat's book, because that's one of their main themes in that book,
Yeah,
that it's not about numbers only.
no.
There are numbers, but generally, most of the research we could really use is not statistical research.
No, and I know that, and I think that for me, that is probably the biggest hurdle, is, you know, I read the words, I understand the words, but when I try to apply them to what I'm doing, I find I have a really difficult time making sense of it, using the terminology that you're giving us. Like, I know what I know in my own words, but I find that I have a difficult time bridging the gap from the data words and the words that are appropriate and fitting to this course, and being able to apply them to what I know as an educator, if that makes sense.
So does that apply to the text as well? Do you have trouble?
No, I read the text and it's fine and I get it and it makes sense. And I don't know if it's just some of those perceptions from the past where, you know, a professor or a teacher, you know, that I'm trying to deal with, you know, those voices from the past. Like, I don't know. But I know it has to do with some, like, the word data bothers me.
Well, the fact of the matter is, when you're doing research, you do have to deal with data.
No, I know.
But you've got to get your head over the fact that data equals numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you're doing, and you're doing it, is data.
Right.
So the fact that you can write can collect data, can analyze data, shows that you do know what data is, and it's not just numbers.
Right, so I guess it is, and I appreciate the feedback that you've given us, so it's just, for me, because of my, I don't know what we want, insecurity with data, that for me, feedback and more direction might be something that would work for me.
Well, your writing took off when you started putting headings in. It just changed the whole face of it.
Really?
Changed the whole face of it. Listen.
I think in what Jill and Shannon are saying as well, for me, at university I took a course on statistics and different things through, but I would tend to learn if a prof is up there and saying stories and linking something that I'm already familiar with, I can, oh yeah, and just everything, like even when I was like grade 2. So I think more stories or like more real world application. Do you know what I mean with that? Then, like if you said about another student that you had who did a project in relation to this, which you do, but a little bit more, the stories would, like I can remember everything. I guess it's just the way I learn like that, rather than quotes as say.
Okay. Now I want you to sit back and analyze what it feels like to give critical feedback and what advice you can give to those people from whom you want critical feedback. You do, don't you? Do you send that message? Okay, now I want you to think about what it feels like to give critical feedback. And I want you to think about how you're going to help those people from whom you want critical feedback to give you the information you need.
Ask that last person again, sorry. What does it feel like? What advice can you give people?
So that you can get them to give you the feedback you need. Because I hear in many papers, people are saying, people give me lovely positives, but they don't give me anything to really work with. And that's back to Jack's quote about Canadians, do not wish to give critical feedback.
But that's the answer, but you have to, one conversation isn't going to do it. Because it may only give you one thing, and you can't, like, I'll be very honest, this level of criticism is too much for me. It bothers me.
Yeah.
And I know that, so.
Well, you have to
he's
find your
right.
comfort area, but I'm trying to push you a little bit here.
No, it's bothering me watching you get
Yeah.
criticized.
I know, and I knew this would happen. But I want you to see if you can't raise or lower your sensitivity on this so that you can help people to help you with some honest, useful critique. But you have to know your own comfort level. I mean, I'm not
Well, I
suggesting.
just think we don't need 20 things to move forward.
No, you
We have
don't.
one or two things to work on. I think
But that's why the questions you ask need to be focused, not on everything that may be wrong with me. I mean, I didn't ask you to examine the color of my hair, or, whether I need to lose some weight. I asked you to talk about my instruction.
And I think that's what you're talking about, that it's a difference, because I heard the word criticism. I'm having trouble having you be criticized, and I think that's the difference. It wasn't to be a criticism, and I think talking about hair and weight and all that stuff is. You were talking about critical feedback in a respectful way so that someone else could improve their practice. And I think there's a difference there, and we have to get used to that.
And to add to that, Liz and I had a discussion, and I taped it the other day. Liz, do you remember this, about the fact that I was looking for critical feedback that I was equating with negativity? And she said, change your language, because it's not negative, it's actually positive. But we say it's positive feedback, and then we say critical feedback, and we put those on two ends of the spectrum, and they're not on two ends of the spectrum. They're very much on the same end. So I think that we have to, and I actually wrote about that. Liz. I used your name too, so hopefully that's okay. But
That's a very insightful comment.
I think, I was thinking about this because one of the questions I asked people was, have you seen me make a mistake? And regardless of the level of trust that I felt with the person, and I made sure I interviewed people with whom I had varying degrees of trust, I would say in some ways the person, I got a lump in my stomach as I asked the question because I was very afraid of what the answer might be. And I would say it's the person with whom I had the best relationship that I had the largest lump. Because I think what I'm worried about is that the relationship will be damaged by the critical feedback. And I think that's and for somebody who's working on relationships, that may seem like an odd comment, but I think that's the most worrisome thing. And I think when you talk about marks, Liz, in some ways, although this is a formal evaluation, that informal evaluation exists all the time in relationships, right? And
Well, everybody's evaluating everybody.
Right. So, I want
We
to...
just don't always say it.
Thank goodness. But I think that's the thing, that I want people to think well of me, and I want to be able to think well of myself, and I'm worried that may be damaged, But I mean, the truth is, you're better to know, because they're probably thinking it anyway.
Well, without that dissonance, though, can there be any change?
No, you have to have that. And it should be scary. If it's not scary, then you're probably not venturing someplace near the edge of where you need to be.
Maybe not scary.
I also think it depends on, like, in your case, when you're talking about have you made a mistake, and the feedback that you get may be more personal about you, then yes, you may get a lump in the throat. But if it has to do for us and this purpose with our work, then you're separating. They're not talking about you as a person. So you have to be able to separate that. It's just what's written on paper. And if it's feedback about something that you're doing in the classroom and something, I don't know, I find that it's different. It's not like you're asking someone to say, can you give me some feedback on whether I'm a good person or not? It isn't. It's just, so maybe that attaching your worth to, it's not really, it's just this work, what can I do to make it better, to help, maybe it's the way you look at it. And you were talking about that framing and looking at the spectrum of like...
Well, we're going to make Ty talk about that, and I can't remember some other, there's design in the title. But I didn't like the way they talked about the depersonalization of teaching and talking about wanting people to set aside. But I think that I actually wrote about it, and I was very negative about that comment, because I thought that I see what you're saying, and I agree 100% that it's your skill, and you want to hone your skill, but teaching is a very personalized profession. So I hated the fact that they framed it and called it depersonalization of teaching.
Well, I mean, it is hard to separate yourself from your work. And it's almost as if someone criticizes your work, it's a personal attack. Because we care about our work.
Maybe it's how it's
ditch. It's not how well you did, how deep you dug a ditch, or how, whatever. It's a very personal act, teaching.
But it's interesting, because the first time when you had that conversation, it suddenly dawned on me that that's one of the problems I've been talking to some colleagues about, is the fact that it's not depersonalized enough in some respects, because what I hear amongst colleagues is some backbiting, this sort of thing, from time to time, and it's because people are so defensive and they're so worried about their own vulnerability that they're trying to protect themselves. Whereas if we could get some of that out of the table, by reducing the emotional content.
Yeah, no, and
It's not depersonalizing it,
no,
but
and I just didn't like the
that's the
term,
wrong-
I
it's
agree
the
with
wrong
what you're
word, but
saying,
yeah.
yeah.
So the first thing I wrote down was that you said, you know, what would I do then when I'm asking for critical feedback? You had started this whole thing with, it's not personal. And I wrote down, well, it's not personal, but it is. For me, it is. And maybe it's different for, you know, depending on who you are and how you see things. I mean, I've made this comment before in this class, I cannot separate Liz, the educator, from Liz, the mother, from Liz, the wife, from Liz. Because the core values and really what it comes down to is the same for me throughout. It's all woven. Sometimes, you know, things are, whatever, focused maybe, more so. But, so it is personal. But that's okay because it's the personal me that wants to grow. And if I can grow as an educator, I can grow as a mother, as a wife, as a friend, as a colleague, as a part of this cosmos. So it is personal, but I'm willing to have that lump in my stomach or that feeling crappy or risking that relationship for that growth. Not that it's easy, but I think it's worth it.
But do you not find with certain people that you can have conversations with them and how that criticism comes across or the notion that you might want to try this or improve with this, depending on the trust that you have with that person? As well, I have certain things that I know are a weakness for me, so I do everything in my power to mask that, to hide it, to not bring them, because showing weakness, unfortunately, in our culture is, you know, that's something we don't do. But, you know, when somebody picks up on that weakness and criticizes you, that, you know, I assumed there was trust, but they didn't understand that that was such a kind of a sore point. So then that became, like, that affected the relationship. So, just another.
Well, I want to go back to the kind of base question that is understated in all of this kind of research, and that is how can we get better? And in order to get better, I mean, the question is how can I improve? In order to get better, we need that feedback that helps us get better. It's like another set of eyes. I want to think that I live according to my values. I know that I don't always do that. But I don't see myself as clearly as others outside of this body see me. And that's what I want people to give me feedback on, because otherwise I can't improve. I will keep doing the same things that I've always done without that information. Now, one of the ways you can get that feedback is simply by parking that video in the corner of your classroom and let it run. You don't have to show anybody if you don't want to. But that's another pair of eyes. And you take it home and you say, oh, geez, I asked that kid 5 times in that class discussion and I didn't get to other people because I kept asking him. Or I ask my questions so quickly, I don't give people time to respond. Those are the kinds of things you can see if you have somebody sitting and watching you, which is very hard to do because people are all busy. Or you just park that camera and let it see what you're doing. Now, again, that can be hard to watch yourself because the first thing you do, you look at it and say, God, I look fat in that outfit. You know, or, geez, I'm looking old these days. But once you get over that, then you can actually start doing that analysis of your work. And I think, Tanya, you're teaching the kids to do that too, aren't you? So, so I got the greatest email from Tanya about how excited she was about her kids using the camera in the classroom. Want to talk about that a bit?
Well, actually, what they're working on right now is some action research, I mean, that's my only criticism of you, Jackie, is that you keep giving me new stuff that I'm running with, and I have even more stuff to do. But I had them actually sit down and analyze what is it that they value about reading. And I mean, these are grade 2s and grade 3s, and they put down the most incredible things about what was important to them. And then I said, I want you to pick one, and I want you to think of a plan of how you are going to improve that piece for yourself. And they're just absolutely loving it. And they're running with it, and every day they're saying, do we get to do our research today? No, not today, you know, we're like, oh. But it's really interesting because they all pick different ways of approaching it. So we've got one little guy that's writing his own books to make reading more fun. We've got one that's acting with it. We've got several that are trying to deepen their feelings when they're looking at books, and how are they, yeah, it's like, it's really cool.
That's really
Deepen their feelings, great.
Yeah. Oh, I don't get enough feelings. I don't have enough mental images when I'm reading. And I mean, these are my really strong readers, so I'm like, wow. I wouldn't have known that you don't do that. So they're working on it, they're talking about it, they're journaling about it. We're hoping to do a bit of presenting next week, maybe. We'll see how it's going.
That's exciting.
It was really, like, I thought, oh, this is so nuts. There's no way. There's no way. They're grade 2s. There's no way they'll be able to do this. And they're just, yeah, they're just running with it, so.
Okay, I thank you sincerely for your feedback. I'm certainly going to take each and every one of your comments to the board and look at what I can do to improve. I want you now to sit for at least 5 or 6 minutes and reflect on what you might do to get that feedback that you're looking for, and what your comfort area is in that. So I hear you, Cheryl, that you couldn't do what I did today, but are there pieces of that that you might be able to take away from it?